Hello everybody, welcome to our fourth lesson that is going to be on the order of operations, which follows the acronym BEDMAS, where the B stands for brackets, the E for exponents or square roots or roots in general, D for division, M for multiplication, A for addition, and S for subtraction. An important thing to note is that division and multiplication, as well as addition and subtraction, are the same priority. So if you have an expression where there is both division and multiplication, for example, you would just go left to right. So there is really no priority. So we're going to look at a few practice questions. So for A, as we can see, we have division and addition. So following BEDMAS, we are going to do the division first. So we end up with 3 plus 2. And then we can do the addition, which is 5. B is a little bit trickier. We have both division and multiplication here. So we're going to go from left to right, but we're going to make sure we do these two first. So we end up with 2 plus 3 minus 6. And then since we have addition and subtraction and they both have the same priority, we're going to go left to right once again. So we're going to end up with 5 minus 6, which is negative 1. For C, it's the same idea. We're going to start with division. So we have 4a minus 3a divided by 3, which is just a. And then since both of these terms have an a in them, we can freely subtract them. So we end up with 3a. For D, since all we're doing is multiplication, we're going to be going from left to right. So we start with negative 2 times negative 5, which is 10. And then times negative 4. This will give us negative 40. For E, we start with multiplication here. So 3x plus 21 minus 3x. And as we can see, the 3x's can cancel out. And so we end up with 21. F is a little bit trickier because here we have multiplication and division, but we're going to go from left to right. So we're going to start with 4 times 5, which is 20, and we're going to keep divided by 2, plus 7 minus, and then we can multiply these together, so minus 8. And now we divide here. And then since we're only left with addition and subtraction, we're going to go from left to right once again. So we end up with 17 minus 8, which is 9. One way to make division easier, a little simpler, is by writing it as a fraction. So we're going to try to do a few examples with that. So here, because we only have division and multiplication, we're going to be going from left to right. And we're going to write 15 divided by 3 as a fraction. Times 4. And 15 divided by 3 is 5. So we end up with 20. B is a similar idea. We have division and multiplication, so we're going left to right. But we can rewrite this as a fraction. And as you can see, the 5s will cancel out. So we're left with 115 as our answer. Here, same idea. We're going from left to right. And we can write this like so. And we can split 9 into its factors. So 9 is equal to 3 times 3. And we can also split 6 into 3 times 2. So now you can visually see how the 3's will cancel out. And so we're left with 41 times 2, which is 82. And the same idea for D. We're going to write this as 9 times 55. Since 333 and 5 are both being divided, that's the same thing as them being multiplied as so in the denominator. So to break down our numerator, we can split 999 into 3 times 333, and 55 is the same as 5 times 11. And so the 333s will cancel, and so will the 5s. And we are left with 3 times 11, which is 33. For E, it's the same idea. We're going to write this as a fraction. So anything that is being multiplied is in the numerator, and everything that is being divided is being multiplied in the denominator, if that makes sense. And then we can split these a little bit more. So 3 and 5 will stay the same, but 8 is the same thing as 2 times 2 times 2. And 6 is the same as 2 times 3. And so the 3's will cancel out, and so will these 2's. And we're left with 5 times 2, which is 10. For F, it's the same idea. We're gonna write this as a fraction, so we have 3 divided by -2 times -3 times -4. Now, solely looking at the negatives, we can see that there are 2 negatives in the numerator and 1 in the denominator. So these negatives will cancel out, and we're left with only a negative in the numerator, which means that this whole, well, whatever our answer is, will be negative. So we can write this as this. Then we can further simplify, as 4 can be written as 2 times 2, and our 2's will cancel. And we are left with -3 times 3 times 2, where we can go from the left to the right as everything is being multiplied. And we end up with -9 times 2, which gives us -18. So now we're introducing brackets into our equations. So following BEDMAS, brackets is the first thing that you should tackle. So in A, for example, when you see 3 plus 9 in brackets, you know that that is the first thing you should calculate. So 3 plus 9 is 12 divided by 3, and then we can look at the division. However, looking at B, where there are no brackets, following BEDMAS, we have to do the division first. So we'll end up with 3 plus 3, giving us 6. So as you can see, we get 2 very different answers. For C, there are no brackets, so we're going to do the multiplication first. So 9 minus 8, and we end up with 1. But then if you add brackets, we have to do the 9 minus 4 first, which is 5 times 2 gives us 10. And once again, our answers are drastically different. Now we're going to get into some more complex stuff. So we're trying to follow BEDMAS. So as you can see here, we have brackets here and here. So we're going to look at those first. So we have 3 squared, which is 9 minus 4. So when you're looking within the brackets, you do BEDMAS once again. So there's subtraction, but there's also an exponent, and exponents come before subtraction. So we have to deal with the 3 squared before we subtract these numbers. And then we can look at the other bracket. Once again, the square root is what has to be done before we add those two numbers. So inside the brackets, we will have 2 plus the root of 9, which is 3. And then before we can multiply these two, we need to solve the brackets individually. So we end up with 5 plus 9 minus 4, which is 5, times 5. And then we see that we have multiplication here. So we have to do that first. And then we can add these two numbers to get our final answer of 30. For b, it's the same idea. We have to solve this bracket first. And the first thing we have to solve in the bracket is the exponent. So 2 to the power of 3 is 8. And then if you look inside the bracket, we have multiplication going on here. So that's the next thing we have to solve. So 3 times 8 is 24. And then only now can we look at the subtraction inside the bracket. And we see that 24 minus 14 is 10. And 3 minus 10 is negative 7. Since these ones are a little trickier, if you didn't get them, I suggest you go slowly, step by step, and try your best to follow BEDMAS and understand what's happening. Now we're going to look at what happens when we're multiplying something with a bracket. So here, for example, we're multiplying A with this bracket. And in order to do this, you need to multiply A by both B and C. So we would end up with A times B plus A times C. And then if there was a minus sign in the middle here, it would be a minus instead of a plus. But if you can add B and C together, like for example in example 5, we have 3x plus 4x in the brackets. Since these are both like terms, we can add them together and we get 7x. This makes it a lot easier because we can just do 2 times 7x, giving us 14x. However, when they're not like terms, you do have to use distributive property and multiply the two by both 3x and 4. So we would end up with 2 times 3x plus 2 times 4, like written here. So for A, as we can see inside the brackets, there's an x and a 4. And these two are not like terms, so we do need to use distributive property. So we're going to multiply the 2 with the x and with the negative 4. So we end up with 2 times x, and then since there's a minus here, we put the minus, and we have 2 times 4. And since 2x and 8 are not like terms, we cannot simplify this any further, and so we would just leave this as is. And it's the same idea here, because 5 plus a cannot be simplified any further because they're not like terms. We have to use distributive property. So we end up with 5 times 5, which is 25, plus 5 times a, which is 5a. And this cannot be simplified any further. Here it's the same idea. They're not like terms, so we need to use distributive property. Here we're going to multiply 2x by x and minus 2x times 3. And following BEDMAS, we're going to do our multiplications first. So 2x times x gives us 2x squared minus 6x. And once again, this cannot be further simplified, so it is left as is. And for D, same thing, they're not like terms, so we have to use distributive property. So we end up with x times x plus x times 5. And we have to deal with the multiplication first. So x squared plus 5x. An important thing to note is that when you have a negative number in front of a bracket, you have to make sure that you multiply the negative number by x and the negative number by 3. You can't just multiply 2 by x and 2 by 3. You have to make sure that you carry the negative as well. So for this example, we would have 7 minus 2 times x plus negative 2 times 3. So as you can see, we carried the negative 2. You can even write this as 7 plus negative 2 times x in brackets. And then following BEDMAS, we have to do our multiplications first. So we end up with 7 plus negative 2x plus negative 6. And then a plus times a minus gives us a minus. So we have 7 minus 2x. And same here, a plus times a minus gives us minus 6. So we end up with 7 minus 6, which is negative 1 minus 2x. And since these are not like terms, this is the farthest we can simplify the expression. So same idea here, disregard the extra bracket. So we're going to make sure we multiply the negative 3x into the brackets. So we end up with negative 3x times 1. And then because there's a minus here, we're going to put minus negative 3x times x. And then we have to simplify the brackets first. So we have 3 plus negative 3x times 1, which is just negative 3x, minus negative 3x times x, which is negative 3x squared. And then here we have a plus times a minus, so this ends up being a minus. And here we have minus times minus, which gives us a plus. And this is the furthest that this can be simplified because they're not like terms. Here there is no negative, so we're only multiplying the 3 into the bracket. So we end up with 3 times x and then plus 3 times 3. So we do the brackets first. And these two are like terms, so we can add them together. And our final answer is 4x plus 9. Here we have negative 2x that is getting distributed. So we have negative 2x times x plus negative 2x times 3. And then we look at the brackets. Negative 2x times x gives us negative 2x squared. And negative 2x times 3 gives us negative 6x. And then here we have a plus times a minus sign. So this ends up being minus 2x squared. And here we have a plus and a minus as well, so it ends up being minus 6x. And 7x and 6x are like terms, so we can write them together like this. Make sure you bring this negative along too. And so our final answer will be x minus 2x squared. Now, when you have only a negative in front of brackets, there's a little 1 there. So this can be written as 3/4 minus 1 times your bracket. So this negative 1 is what's getting distributed. So we end up with plus negative 1 times 1 over 3a. And then there's a minus here, so minus negative 1 times 1 over 4. And then we look at our brackets first. So we end up with negative 1 over 3a minus negative 1 over 4. And then here we have a plus sign times a minus sign. So this is going to end up being minus 1 over 3 times a. And then here we have a minus times a minus, which is plus 1 over 4. And since 3 over 4 and 1 over 4 are like terms, we can write them together. And so we end up with 4 over 4 minus 1 over 3a. And 4 over 4 is just 1, so this can also be written as 1 minus 1 over 3a. Here we have to do distributive property twice because we have 3 times this bracket, and here we have negative 2 times this bracket. So we're going to get 3 times 3a minus 3 times 3 plus minus 2 times a plus minus 2 times minus 3. And then we look at all the individual brackets. And here we have 3 times 3a, which is going to be 9a, minus 3 times 3, which is 9, plus negative 2 times a, which is negative 2a, plus negative 2 times negative 3, so it's a negative times a negative, which is going to give us positive 6. And here we have a positive times a negative, so this is going to end up being negative 2a. And move over here. We can see that 9a and negative 2a both have a in it, and so they're like terms. And then negative 9, and positive 6 are also like terms. So we can move those together. And so 9a minus 2a gives us 7a, and negative 9 plus 6 gives us negative 3. And so this is our final expression. So for practice 8, I suggest you guys try to work through this one on your own first, and then pause the video, and then once you finish, replay it, and we'll go over it together. So we're going to make sure we follow BEDMAS. So first, we're going to look at the bracket here. So we have to distribute this, but first, if we look inside the bracket, we can see that all of those numbers are like terms, and so we can combine them. So first we are going to do the multiplication. So we're going to end up with 2 plus 12 and then we can add 2 plus 12, which is 14. And then to finish this bracket off, we can multiply the 2 times 14 to give us 28. And we can also try to solve this. So because there's both multiplication and division, we just go from left to right. So first we're going to do 6 times 5, which is 30. And then we are going to do 30 divided by 3, which is positive 10. And then we're left with subtraction and addition. So we're once again going left to right. So 10 minus 28 is negative 18. And then negative 18 plus 10 is negative 8, which is our final answer. So this next question here, I suggest you guys also try to do it on your own because this is actually one from our contest last year. So it's good practice. So this one looks rather intimidating, but if we follow BEDMAS, we can see that first we need to solve the brackets. So we have one here, and another one here, and a third one here. So here we have a negative 1 in front of the bracket. So we're going to distribute negative 1. No, actually, because they're like terms, we can just subtract those. So we're going to end up with 2 minus 3 minus 9, which is negative 6, plus 2 times 1 minus, and then we have these two brackets here, which we can just solve right off the bat. So we have 5 minus 3, which is going to give us 2. And this is multiplied by 3 minus 9, which is negative 6. And then plus 5. And then this entire term is divided by 3. And then here, as you can see, this is squared. So this is going to be 1 minus 3 times 1 minus 3. Then we can finish this off. So we see that this is minus times minus. So we end up with plus 6 plus 2. And then here these are being multiplied. So 2 times negative 6 is going to give us negative 12 plus 5. And then this is all divided by 3. Times. And these two have to be distributed. So we have to go like that. This 1 is going to get multiplied by 1 and by negative 3. And then this negative 3 is going to be multiplied by 1 and this negative 3. So we have 2 plus 6 plus 2 times 1, and then negative times negative is positive, so we're going to have plus 12 minus 5 divided by 3 minus 3x, and then we can start to deal with these two brackets here. So we have 1 times 1 gives us 1, and then we have 1 times negative 3 gives us negative 3, and then we have negative 3 times 1 gives us negative 3, and we have negative 3 times negative 3 gives us a positive 9. So we have 2 plus 6 plus, and then we can solve this entire bracket here, just going from left to right. So 1 plus 12 is 13. 13 minus 5 is 8. So we end up with 2 times 8 over 3. And we can also solve this bracket by going from left to right. So we have 1 minus 3, which is negative 2, minus 3 is negative 5, plus 9 is 4. And then we solve the multiplication up here. So 2 times 8 is 16 divided by 3 minus, then we can multiply 3x times 4. We end up with negative 12x My bad, guys. This is not an x. This was a multiplication sign, and I got confused. So this would be negative 3 times like that. So everything was right except there's no x here. Sorry about that. And then we can do the division here. So we have 16 divided by... Okay, guys, I'm so sorry. I made another mistake in the numerator here. So I did my mental math wrong, and it's supposed to be 2 times 18. But yeah, if you guys go through the whole process, you'll end up with 8. The BEDMAS process was correct. It was just the mental math. I apologize for that. So the answer would be E. If you guys have any questions about this or would like me to redo it over again, please put it in the comments of the Google Classroom, and I will definitely run through this problem again. So another big thing when you're working with BEDMAS is that you can have brackets inside of brackets. So as you can see here, we have these square brackets, and then within the square brackets, we have 2 sets of round brackets. And so we would want to solve these round brackets first individually, and then solve the square bracket, and then multiply by 2. So to do this, we would start with this bracket here, and we would start with the exponent, right? So 2 squared is 4 plus 1. And then here we have multiplication, so we want to do that first because we're still following BEDMAS. So we end up with 6 minus 4. And now we can solve these brackets. So we can even get rid of these brackets. So we have 4 plus 1, which is 5, minus 6 minus 4 is 2. So we end up with 2 times 3, which is 6. So you want to make sure you solve the inner brackets first and then solve the outer brackets. And for B, it's the same idea. We want to solve this inner bracket and then we solve the outer bracket. So we have multiplication, so we want to do that first. So we end up with 8 minus 6. And then we want to fully solve this inner bracket. So 8 minus 6 is 2. And then we want to solve this big bracket, and we have multiplication, so we want to do that first. So we have 10 minus 2 times 2, which is 4. And 10 minus 4 is 6. So we end up with 2 minus 6, which is negative 4. And for C, it's the same idea. We want to solve these inner brackets first. So 2 plus 5 is 3. No, 2. What am I doing? 2 plus 5 is 7. Minus 3 minus 2 is 1. So we end up with negative 7 minus 1, which is negative 8. So we end up with negative 24. This one is a little bit trickier. We have to solve this bracket, but because they're not like terms and we're being multiplied by negative 1, we have to use distributive property. So this is going to end up being 1 minus 1 over 2, because minus 1 times 1 over 2, and then minus 1 times negative x gives us positive x. And then 1 can be written as 2 over 2. And now since 2 over 2 and 1 over 2 have the same denominator, we can subtract them. So when we're subtracting, we only look at the numerator. So 2 minus 1 is 1, and then the denominator stays the same. And then once again, we can perform distributive property. So we end up with 1 over 2 times 1 over 2. And in this case, you multiply the numerators and you multiply the denominators. So we end up with 1 times 1 in the numerator, which is just 1, and 2 times 2 in the denominator, which is 4. And then we do the same with the x. The x has a denominator of 1, so it doesn't really matter. So it's only x over 2. And that's how we would leave it. Or you can write this as 1 over 2x. They're the same thing. So now we're going to take a look at a way to make calculations easier by combining terms. So here, as you can see, we have a string of numbers being added from 1 to 10, and every single term is increasing by 1. So 1 plus 2 plus 3, so on and so forth. So the way we would look at this is that if we take the very first number, which is 1, and the very last number, which is 10, and if we added them together, we would get 11, right? Then if you take a look at the second number, which is 2, and the second last number, which is 9, if you added them together, we would also get 11. And 3 and 8 also make 11. 4 and 7 also make 11. And 5 and 6 also make 11. So the way we would do this is that we would count how many pairs we have that make 11. So we would have 1 plus 10 plus 2 plus 9 plus 3 plus 8 plus 4 plus 7 and 5 plus 6. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we can write this as 5 times 11, because each of these brackets equals 11, and since there's 5 of them, we can simply add 11 5 times, which is the same as doing 5 times 11. So we know that this string of numbers, when it's added, is 55. And we can do the same thing for B. We can add A plus 19A plus 3A plus 17A, because if you take a look at the pattern, these are increasing by 2A. So this would be decreasing by 2A. And then we'll have 5A plus 15A. And we'll have 7a plus 13a, then 9a plus 11a, and that's it. Because the next one would be 11a and 9a, which is this. So we only have 5 pairs. So if we add all of these brackets up, each bracket is 20a. A plus 19a is 20. 3 plus 17, also 20. So these are all equal to 20. So since we have 5 pairs of 20a, our final answer will be 100a. And here we would do the same thing. We would have -5 minus 55, the first and the last. And then we see that these are decreasing by 5, and then these ones are increasing by 5. So our next pair would be -10 minus 50. And then we would have -15 minus 45. -20 minus 40. -25 minus 35. However, this one is a little bit different because we are left with a term. We do not have exactly 6 pairs. We have 5 pairs, and then we're left with -30 on its own, because we have 11 terms in our entire sequence. So each bracket here is equal to -60. So we would have -60 times the number of brackets. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we can't forget about this -30 that isn't a pair. So we have to make sure we also add -30 to our answer. And so we'll end up with -300 minus 30. So our final answer is -330. Another way to go about adding a bunch of numbers is by finding a common factor, which is a number that is common for each term. So here, for example, our common factor would be 20. Because if we were to take 20 out and multiply it by every single number, well, in this case, to find what's in the brackets, we need to divide it by every single number. So if we look at our first term, we have 20. 20 divided by 20 is 1, plus 40 divided by 20 is 2, plus 60 divided by 20 is 3, then 4, then 5. And now if we were to multiply 20 back into these brackets using distributive property, we would get 20 times 1, which is 20, plus 20 times 2, which is 40, plus 20 times 3, which is 60, plus 80, plus 100, which is exactly this right here. So now it is a lot easier to add up these numbers in the bracket than adding up all of these larger numbers. So here we would have 20 times 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 is 15. And so 20 times 15 is 300. And that is our final answer. So for B, we can do the same thing, where here the common factor would be 100. And if we were to divide 100 from each of the terms in this sequence, we would have 100 divided by 100, which is 1, plus 200 divided by 100 is 2, plus 3, plus 4, and we keep going until 2,000 divided by 100, which is 20. Now, in order to sum this bracket up, we can do what we were doing earlier, where we added the very first term to the last term, and the second term to the second last term, and so on and so forth. But an easier way to do this would be to know right off the bat how many pairs, like how many brackets you need to make, instead of writing them all out. So to do this is you would need to know how many numbers you have in this bracket. So here we have 20 numbers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 20. And so if we have 20 numbers and there's 2 numbers in each bracket, we're going to have 20 divided by 2 pairs. So we're going to have 10 pairs in total. So instead of writing out all of these pairs, we just know that there are going to be 10 pairs, and we know that each bracket is going to be equal to 21, because 1 plus 20 is 21 and 2 plus 19 is also 21. So we would end up with 100 times 210, which is going to give us 1, 2, 3 zeros as our final answer. So now we come to our final question, which is also a challenge question. So I suggest you guys take a minute, pause this video, and try to solve it yourself, and then come back when you're ready to look at the answer and go through all the steps. So we're going to start this question off exactly how we did the other ones. So to find the sum, we're going to add up the first number and the last number, and then the second number added to the second last number. And the second last number is going to be n minus 1, right? Because we don't know what n is. But we do know that here it's increasing by 1, right? 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. So every number is going up by 1. So when you go backwards, every number is going to be decreasing by 1. And then we would have 3 plus, now it's n minus 2. And we would keep going until we hit all of our pairs. So we know that every single one of these pairs, each of these brackets are going to equal to 1 plus n, right? Because they're all the same. Here you can even simplify this bracket. This would be 2 plus n minus 1. And this can be simplified to n plus 2 minus 1, which is n plus 1, which is equal to this first bracket here. So since we know that every single pair is going to equal to 1 plus n, we just need to know how many pairs there are so that we can multiply this by the number of pairs. And as we talked about earlier, the number of pairs is simply how many numbers you have in total divided by 2. So when we look at this sequence here, we see that we have n number of numbers. So our number of pairs would be n divided by 2. So this would be our sum for this sequence. So we've come to the end of the video. If you guys have any questions or require further practice or anything at all, please leave a comment in the Google Classroom and we will answer to you. Thank you so much for tuning in.